Hello everyone. Today is the 17th video of my database management systems practical video series, and I'm going to do the seventh video of the fourth day of database management systems question list, and this is also going to be the 17th question uh, of the question list. And let's go to the question list. Here's the day 4, and under that title you can see the question 17. Here you can see we are not going to do a new question. We are continuing the previous question we talked earlier in the question 16. If you didn't watch that video, you have to watch that video first before come to this video, because we created a ER diagram in that question, and then I think we have to use that ER diagram to answer to the question 17. Let's continue our video. Here's the first question. What is the relationship between student and subject? Can this relation be in database? Okay, let's talk about the relationship between student table and the subject table. Let me open the software we use to create the ER diagram. Here's the ER diagram we created in the previous video, and here's the student table and here's the subject table. When we defining a relationship between these two tables, we have to consider, let me get the student table first. If we consider a single record inside the student table, that means if we consider a single student recorded in this student table, that student can be study more than one subject in this school. So if we define a relationship between student table and the subject table, the the data of the student should store in the subject table more than one times, because there are many subjects which can be studied by that particular uh, student. And then if we consider the subject table, a single subject or a single record in the subject table can be stored more than one times in the student table. That's because a single subject can be studied by more than one children in this school. So that means, let me show you a snap of this uh, ER diagram, and I'll draw a relationship that will explain what I'm talking right now. If we define the relationship, here's the relationship between these two tables. There's a one-to-many relationship. It means a single student can be stored more than one times in the student table, and also uh, if you consider the subject table, a single subject can be stored more than one times in the student table. So there's a one-to-many relationship with these two tables to both sides. That means we can erase this one and define a many-to-many relationship between these two tables. Here's the many-to-many relationship between these two tables. But we talk about in my previous videos, there can't be a many-to-many relationship defined in a ER diagram. So we have to create a separate table for store that relationship, or store that records, and then the two tables which have the many-to-many relationship should have a one-to-many relationship with the new table we created, like this one. There's a one. There should be a one-to-many relationship on both sides. It's because a single record can be stored more than one times in this table, and then a single record of the subject table can be stored more than one times in this table, and we can erase this one-to-many relationship, and here's the new relationship between these two tables. Let's create this relationship or define this relationship in this ER diagram. You can see there's I told you before, there are two methods we can use to define a one-to-many relationship. You can use this automatic method, or simply use this button, this one-to-many relationship button, and then if you want, you can create a new table and then define a one-to-many relationship uh, between these two tables. Both methods are correct. I'm going to use the first one. I'm going to use this button to define this one-to-one relationship. Let's see what will happen. We define a relationship. I click on this button, and there's no order like defining the one-to-many relationships. There's no order what table should select first, because both sides have main-to-many relationship with each other. So I'm selecting student table and then the subject table. You can see a new table created, and it has a one-to-many relationship with both sides. And you can see the ID of the student table and the ID of the subject table are foreign to the student has subject table. That's a default name. We usually call this new table the student has subject. And you can see the relationship. There's a straight line to indicate the relationship. That means there's a identifying relationship, identifying one-to-many relationship with student table and the student has subject table. Other side is also the same. I told you what the difference between what's the difference between non-identifying like this, the non-identifying uh, relationships and the identifying relationships. Uh, if we define a non-identifying relationship like this one, if there's a non-identifying relationship, it indicates in dotted lines. If we define that one, the ID of the or the primary key of the student table will be foreign to the student has subject table, but it will not affect when we define the duplication or the repetition in the student has subject table. Uh, these two methods, the non-identifying and the identifying methods, will are using to when we are considering the duplication in the new table. If we use non-identifying methods, the attribute or the primary key which is going to foreign to the student has subject table will not affect when we consider a duplication in that table. The student has subject, but in this case we define and identifying one-to-many relationships. Because of that, the foreign key, the primary key of the student table, which is foreign to the student has subject table, will be affect or will be considered when we define a duplication in this student has subject table. The primary key and the foreign keys, actually we can say it like this, the same primary key and the same foreign keys will not be duplicate uh, more than one times in this table. But usually there's no when there's no identifying relationship, usually the primary key will be the only attribute we use to identify a duplication. The primary key uh, cannot be the only value which can't duplicate in a table. So in this connection, we use an identifying relationship between the student table and the subject table. Okay, here we complete our first question, and then let's move on to the second one. Create a relationship between student and subject. Okay, actually we do that part. That means we completed that second part too. We define the relationship between these two tables, and the answer to this first one, what is the relationship between these two tables, is there's a many-to-many relationship between those two tables. But can this relation be in the database? No, there can't be. This relationship can't be in the database. There should be a new table with the one-to-many relationship between those two tables. Okay, here's the third one. Change the name of the table created above to student exam mark record. Okay, that means the table we created uh, when we defining the. Let me go to the Workbench software. That means this table, the new table we created when we defining the one-to-many relationship, we have to change the name of this table. We have to change it to student exam mark record. Okay, you know how to change a name or how to edit a table. uh, you just right click on the table you want to edit and then press edit student has subject table. Okay, here we can change the name uh, to student exam mark record. Student exam mark record. Okay, we change the name of our table. Okay, we completed the third one, and here's the fourth one. Create a relationship between the table student exam mark and the term exam mark. Okay, there's another table called exam term. You can see there's a table called exam term. And when we are defining the relationship between these two tables, uh, the exam table is the table we use to store the details about the terms that are held in or will be held in this school in the exam, and the exams they are going to held. Okay, uh, and then the student exam mark record should have a relationship between the exam term table, but there can't be a relationship, or we cannot store the details of the student exam mark record in the exam term. Usually we don't do that. The correct method is we have to store the data related to the exam term in the student exam mark record, because student exam mark record is the table we are going to store the details about the student and the subject he studied, and the exam we are going to exam the student are facing. So that's why the exam term ID should store in the student exam mark. Let me show you uh, the snapshot again. Here's the snapshot. Here's a snapshot of the ER diagram we created, and if we define the relationship, we have to draw the new table here. You can see here's the new table which has a relationship with student and subject tables, and here's the student has subject table. And then if we define a relationship with exam term and the with the student has subject table, there should be a one to many relationship between these two tables. That's because like I told you earlier, a term can be faced by a term test, or exam can be faced by many students uh, who are recorded in this student has subject table. Okay, so let's define that connection. I'm selecting the non-identifying relationship. We don't need an identifying relationship. We can just use the non-identifying method, because we already this table already have a compound key. So I'm going to click on the table where the many connection there's a many connection with the other table, which is the student exam mark record, and then the exam term table. You can see the ID of the exam term table stored in the student exam mark record. Okay, here we completed that part, the fourth one, and let's go to the fifth one. Add a column called mark to the student exam mark record table. Change the data type to double. Okay, we have to add a new column to this table. If we talk about the name of this table, student exam mark record, we are storing about the details of students and the exams they are facing, and also the marks they managed to get to that exam. So we have to store the marks of the students. That's why we are inserting a new column, new attribute called mark. So let's add that new column. Here I'm defining a new column called mark, and then I'm changing the data type to double, because there can be floating points in the in a mark. So that's why we are defining the data type to double. And here we created our attribute inside the student exam mark record. Let's go to the question. We completed the fifth one, and here's the sixth one, and also the last one. Create a relationship between student and class. Okay, you can see here's the class table, and there's no relationship which any of these tables. The class table, we have to define a relationship. Student are the entities or peoples who studied in classes. The students are belong to the classes, and there can be many students. If we consider a single record in the student table, that means a student cannot be repeat in the class table. That's because he cannot be in more than one class in a time, in occasion. So and also the if we consider the class record in a class table, that means a class can be recorded in the student table more than one times, because there can be many students who studied in the same class. So that means there's a one-to-many relationship from class table to student table, not from student table to class table. That's because we don't store the details about the students inside the class table. But when we recording the student details, we usually record about their classes, the current classes they are in. So that's why I am I'm going to define this one-to-many relationship from student table to class table. Let me draw that uh, relationship before creating that one. Here's our student has mark table. We don't need this one. I'm going to clear this part. Let's Here's the student table and here's the class table. Let's go the relationship between these two tables. You can see the single record of a class table can be recorded many times in the student table. So many to the student table and one to the class table. You can see we have if we after we define this connection, there should be an attribute or a foreign key called class id in the student table, but the student index cannot be stored in the class table. So that's why I define this relationship this way. And let's go to our ER diagram and uh, define the relationship between student table and the class table. I'm going to define a non-identifying one-to-many relationship because there's already we defined the primary key already, and also the class can be recorded many times in this student table. So I'm selecting the non-identifying one-to-many relationship, and we have to click on the table which have the many connection with the other table first, which is the student table and then the class table. You can see the class id stored in the student table as a foreign key. So here we completed our sixth part of the question 17, and I think that's it for this video. Let's see you in the next video, and thank you very much for watching.